We're about to start any second. Thank you again for your patience. I think we'll be ready any minute. All right, so now we are finally ready to go. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and for your patience. We had a few minutes delay to begin this program. Today is the day 2 of our conference. This must be the place, Latin York. It's a great pleasure to have you today. Yesterday we had day 1 of the conference and it was a beautiful event. This is a conference co-organized with ISLAA, the Institute for Studies in Latin American Art. And we are thrilled to be organizing this gathering to discuss, the different aspects in which we can review the art from the 1960s and 70s, and specifically the contribution of Latin American migrants to the New York art scene of that period. As we explained yesterday, but just to reiterate very briefly, this is a conference that is associated with an exhibition that started last September at America Society, organized in 2 parts. Part 1 happened between September and December, and part 2 is happening from January until May. It has more than 40 artists and 11 collectives, and is trying to highlight the networks and communities that these artists form in the city and their interactions among each other and with other American and international artists that made New York the cosmopolitan center that it became during this period. As part of that conference today, we have a very live program that starts now with a panel on the contemporary resonance that I will be presenting very shortly. Between 11 and noon, we're going to do a lunch break, and you can stay on and come back at 2, where we're going to be back with 2 more panels about topics associated. And then we're also going to have a keynote speaker conference by Jasmine Ramirez in the afternoon. I hope you can stay with us. And if you have to log off for any part of the day, feel free to see this recording or the live stream in our YouTube channel or also in our website. So now I'm going to pass the words to Blanca Serrano from the Institute for Studies on Latin American Art, and I want to thank them again. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Aimé. It's a pleasure to join the second day of the conference. It was an incredible success yesterday. I really enjoyed the keynote and the 2 panels. And thank you for having ISLAA be part of this exhibition, publication, and conference. I am project director at ISLAA, where I manage research and academic programs, and founded in 2011 and based in New York City. ISLAA supports scholarship and public engagement with arts from Latin America through this engagement with universities and international programs, including publications and exhibitions. And ISLAA is very proud to have loaned a number of key works to the exhibition This Must Be the Place. It is also the co-publisher of the This Must Be the Place publication, and we are delighted to also support this 2-day conference that I am sure is going to be a game changer in scholarship in the field. And I don't want to reiterate what I said yesterday, but I'm really sure that this is going to be become an iconic reference for the revision of US constructed mythologies around 1960s and 1970s art. And it's going to shed light on the key importance of Latin American migrants' contribution to this period, as I said. And I hope it will also become an encouraging milestone for new generations of migrants in the city to claim their heritage and their contribution to the current art scenes. Thank you so much, Aimé, and your wonderful and enthusiastic team for having us be part of this program. And to learn more about ISLAA and about what we do, please visit our website, islaa.org. That's ISLAA.org. And thank you so much.
All right, so now it's my turn to introduce our first panel for today. The panel is called, it's a roundtable, it's called Contemporary Resonances of the 1970s, and it features Arlene Dávila, who's going to give her remarks, and then we have a conversation with contemporary artists, Alicia Grushon, Mari Valverde, Glendalis Medina, and Elia Elba. I'm gonna be reading briefly their biographies, and then I'm gonna pass the word to Arlene. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're very excited about this panel and to hear your thoughts about to which degree this, this period informs the contemporary practice of these artists and the contemporary scene of Latin American and Latinx artists in New York today. So Arlene Dávila is a professor of anthropology and American studies at New York University, whose research spans urban ethnography, the political economy of culture and media, consumption, immigration, and geographies of inequality and race. Her work has focused on the ethnographic study of the local, national, and global dynamics of contemporary US, Latinx, and Latin American cultural politics. This research interest grew out of her early work in Latino and multicultural specific museums and spaces in New York City, and have developed through her continued involvement in Latina advocacy and her interest in creative industries across the Americas. She's the founder and director of the Latinx Project at NYU and author of Latinx Artists, Markets, and Politics, published in 2020. With regards to participating artists of this roundtable, we have Alicia Grushon, who is based in New York City. She's from and based in New York City. Her work has been shown in numerous group exhibitions, including in the 8th floor, the Bronx Museum of the Arts, Brick House for Arts and Media, the School of Visual Arts, El Museo del Barrio, Columbia University, Socrates Sculpture Park, Performa 11, Allston House, and Art in Odd Places. She has received grants from the Puffin Foundation, the Bronx Council of the Arts, the Department of Cultural Affairs in the City of New York, and Franklin Furnace Archives. She has participated in artist residencies with Hemispheric Institute for Politics and Performance at New York University, Center for Book Arts, Bronx Museum of Arts, and 80 White Street AIM alum, and Shandaken Project on Governor's Island. She has presented for the 2017 Whitney Biennial with Occupy Museums, Creative Times Summit 2015, the Royal College of Art, and the United States Association for Art Educators. Mari Valverde considers herself an interdisciplinary cultural practitioner with a focus on visual arts and cultural research. She centers her work and research as a visual artist on the historical and present-day connections between Indigenous and African communities in the Americas, the effects of forced migration, genocide, slavery, ongoing evolution, adjustments, inventions, and shifts in culture. Her work is a testament of the aesthetic language, paying homage to indigeneity and African diasporas through the abstraction of traditional systems, codes, and patterns. Mari Valverde received her MFA at the University of Pennsylvania in 2012 and her BFA from the School of Visual Arts, New York in 1999. Valverde teaches at Hunter College. Since 2015, she served as a commissioner for the Public Design Commission of the City of New York and often contributes as an advisor to the New York City Cultural Arts Affairs. Valverde is currently the artist in residency at the Latinx Project at NYU, has had residencies at the CCSRE Mellon Arts Practitioners Fellowship at Stanford University, and has a forthcoming residency at the McCall Center for Art and Innovation in North Carolina. Glendalis Medina is a conceptual interdisciplinary artist and received an MFA from Hunter College. Medina has presented artwork on such notable venues as PAM, Participant Inc., Performance 19, Artist Space, the Bronx Museum of Art, El Museo del Barrio, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Vigo, Spain, and the Studio Museum in Harlem, among others. Medina was a recipient of a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant. a Jerome Hill Foundation Fellowship, an ACE Hotel New York City Artist Residency, an SIP Fellowship at EFA Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop, a Back in 5 Minutes Artist Residency at El Museo del Barrio, a residency at YADU, the Rome Prize in Visual Arts, a New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship in Interdisciplinary Art, and the Bronx Museum Artist in the Marketplace Residency. Medina is currently a professor at SBA MFA Art Practice Program and lives and works in New York. Finally, Elia Elba was born in Brooklyn to parents who immigrated from the Dominican Republic in the 1950s. She's a multidisciplinary artist who works in photography, video, and sculpture. She received her Bachelor of Arts from Hunter College in 1994 and completed the Whitney Museum Independent Program in 2001. She has exhibited at the Studio Museum in Harlem, El Museo del Barrio, the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, the Science Museum in London, the Smithsonian Museum of Art, El Museo del Barrio, Itaú Cultural Institute in Sao Paulo, the National Museum of Art, the Reina Sofia in Madrid. Her awards include the Studio Museum in Harlem Artist in Residency Program in 1989, the Pollock Krasner Foundation Grant in 2002, the Jean Mitchell Foundation Grant in 2002 and 2008, Anonymous Was a Woman Award in 2019, and the Latinx Artist Fellowship in 2021. Collections include the Smithsonian Museum of Art, El Museo del Barrio, the Low Art Museum. Her book, Elia Elba, The Super Club, published by Hirmer in 2019, brings together artists, scholars, and performers of diasporic cultures through photography, food, and dialogue to examine race and culture in the United States. She lives and works in the Bronx and is artist in residency at the Andrew Friedman House. So with that, I'm going to pass the word to Arlene. Thank you so much, Arlene.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aimé and Tia for organizing this very important and timely exhibition, and Sophia for gathering us together in these 2 days of thinking, and all the artists that are part of this program. As we know, the exhibition focuses primarily on migrant Latin American artists, many of whom had national privilege and cultural capital when they arrived to New York City at a moment when New York City was emerging as the capital of the arts in the world. For their part, Latinx artists are referenced as movement actors in regards to collectives such as Taller Boricua, but they're not treated as individual artists, as the key agents of the exhibition are in fact Latin American artists who moved to New York City within the decade that is the focus of the exhibition. So the idea for this panel was to highlight Latinx artists who called New York City home for generations and to feature them as key artistic agents who can discuss the resonances of this period in their practice today and also in New York City art worlds. In particular, the exhibition captures a pivotal moment when the predominant colonial migrant Puerto Rican community who made New York City's Latinx communities at the times were shaping spaces and alternative cultural organizations and museums across the city, focusing on representation. This is a time when battles for visibility were very much community focused. In other words, the activities of the Latinx artists of the times cannot be necessarily equated with those of the Latin American global communities of artists that came to New York City looking for space for representations as artists with a capital A. Since the ethos of the then New Yorican art movement, for the most part, rejected elitist conceptions of art altogether or of individual art altogether. Moreover, this was a time when Latin American migrant artists were discovering their Latin Americanness and their identity here in the city, while the Puerto Rican Latinx communities that were present at the times had already experienced decades of racialization as a Puerto Rican problem, especially within the 1950s social sciences literature as the Puerto Rican problem. Think here of how Puerto Ricans were represented in the West Side Story, produced in 1961 as a kind of key capstone of the moment. Now, this doesn't mean that there were not points of connection between the communities of New Yorican art artists and Latin American migrant art communities, for instance, and this is documented in the literature, both shared a global third world ethos, so present at the time, the internationalism of revolutionary politics that imbricated the air and fed revolutionary ideas and politics, and most important, a similar quest for challenging the white-centric art world. And also an ethos for seeking alternative ideas and social movements, which were at play not only in the United States, but also across the hemisphere, that enveloped the decade that is the topic of this exhibition. So, yet for the purposes of this panel, I wanted to invite 4 Latinx female artists who I admire, who in my view bring to light the vibrancy, globality, innovation, and the decolonial and anti-racist practices of the Nuyorican alternative art movement of the late 1960s and 70s that in a way resonates with the New York City Latinx art scenes. In my view, similar impetus resonates in their quest for creating multi-ethnic racial communities of artists for collaboration, as we will see in Elia Elba, in their challenge to neoliberal politics by producing work that contests space, place, and establish global linkages with Latin American communities of Black and Indigenous activists. I'm thinking here of the work of the practices of Alicia Gruyon, in their development of visual vocabularies to contest colonial hierarchies of erasure and disappearance, as is the case of Mary Valverde and Glendaliz Medina. And in all of them, in how they maneuver in the New York City art world as Latinas and women of color with rigor and style, while creating robust visual vocabularies that contest racialized representations. Today, you will hear from each of them for about 10 minutes, who will share their practice with all of us, and then we will have a discussion session. Unfortunately, I had an emergency, which, and Tia will be the one who will be moderating the conversation, but that is perfectly fine because who you are here to hear are from the 4 artists, and Tia has a series of questions to convene them. And I'll leave you now with Alicia Gruyon. Thank you.
Hi, how are you, everyone? And thank you, Arlene, for those words and the mention of style, which is so important in so many different contexts. And thank you, Aimé, and thank you, the America Society, for having this incredible panel. And thanks for my fellow panelists whose work I highly admire. I'm going to share my screen and I'll be talking over my screen so you'll see the slides. My name is Alicia Gruyon, and I'm a 47-year-old single parent with 2 tweens, caring for my elderly immigrant father, and living in a settler colonial consumer-driven society. So according to these statistics, I was not meant to make art nor create the sort of freedom needed as an artist to live my life. My presence shatters what Sestian Wahpeton Oyate scholar Dr. Kim Tallbear describes as the colonial standards of settler sex, family, and marriage with a patriarchal head. And I'm not disgracious of the opportunities, nor am I romanticizing living precariously as an artist and adjunct. I am grateful for these moments where I am able to talk about what I have been working on for the last 17 years, where at the time of my graduate studies, there was little room for discussing the intricacies of image making, performance, and participatory art as a member of the Dominican Yor diaspora, living in a reality woven in what W.E.B. Du Bois describes as the double consciousness that afflicts Black people and people of color, a consciousness of not being, created by the dominant culture in order to maintain their sense of superiority. It is what Frantz Fanon describes as the native declared insensible to ethics, where they represent not only the absence of values, but also the negation of values, where they are deformed elements disfiguring all that has to do with beauty or morality. So I put my body in situations that have historically not been meant for me, or designed so I have little control over how I am represented in them, by which I mean my body as a signifier. How do I read as I walk into a room when the signification of my body will vary based on who is doing the looking within the context of the settler, plantation, colonial, patriarchal gaze? And these situations have included the Revolutionary War, the United Nations, museums, universities, among others. And I encourage viewers to reflect upon my work as a storytelling process, bordering between the staged and the documentary. I use performance art, participatory art, photography, and video towards critiques on the politics of presence that argue for the inclusion of disinvested communities in political and social spheres. The nature of my work has consisted of understanding the camera as an imperial tool and using embodied research through self-portraiture, performance, and organizing to dismantle the gaze. And this has been in itself a complicated endeavor as a person of color,